So I walked into Target and I saw this woman with this beautiful little girl, and the little girl had a dress on. She looked very cute. They walked in, they're super happy. Walked into Target and they went over to the toy section, and I happened to be over there. I don't know why, but I was there. And I noticed them bargaining with each other. And this little girl had picked up this toy and said, "Mommy, I would like to have this toy." And the mommy said, "Julie, you are not going to get that toy today." Have you ever seen the face of evil? This little girl had a look of an evil, I'm just going to leave it at person. And she looked at her mom, and I'll quote what she said: "Mom, I'm having this. We are not leaving until I get it." And the look on her face was like evil. And the mother is bargaining with her and begging her to put it back, and they left with the toy. We need to recapture the family. We need to, in these days when things are really, really tough, we live in a pretty complex world. We need to recapture the family. The family is the most important unit in society. When the family breaks down, all of society breaks down. And so this series is dedicated to recapturing the family. And today we want to talk about recapturing children. So you're going to need a Bible. If you need a Bible this morning, raise your hand. Our ushers will come by with a Bible you can use. And if you would turn to Ephesians chapter 6. Now, before we get to Ephesians 6, I'm going to look at Proverbs 22. I'll have it on screen for you so you don't have to look there unless you want to. Proverbs chapter 22. But we welcome all of those of you online. Sorry, we were a little late today, but our tech guys are troubleshooting and made it happen. And so welcome with us. Those of you on Facebook Live, welcome as well. And we're going to dig into this whole matter of training children. I want to share something I kind of came up with, I call adaptive training. Adaptive training is where you have to understand that every one of your children is different. How many of you have more than one child? Raise your hand. How many of you have just one child? So, look, you people are really blessed. Kimberly and I have raised 7 children, and we are experts. She's an expert of raising children. I'm an expert of watching and cheering her on. Every child is unique. Of those 7 kids, there was only one who was defiant. The others were, like, for example, in adaptive training, if you look at your child with a stern look, you know, that mommy look, my mother used to give me that look, and I would melt when she would look at me. And it was just like, if you don't stop what you're doing, there will be hell to pay. She didn't say that. She was Baptist. She never said hell. But I knew what that meant. And I mean, I was just crushed. But my brother would like mad dog her back. "Yeah, you want a piece of this?" Well, I had one of my children was like that. And she has become a great preacher and a great minister. Carrie, my oldest daughter, she knows she was defiant. And she struggled with it through her whole childhood, but the rest of our children were pretty compliant. And as I look at that, I realize something in our experiences. Every one of your children is different. So you have the same rules, you have the same values, you have the same intent, but you have different methods. Because if you don't change your methods and adapt your training, you're going to miss what God says about children. So what I want to do is I want you to look at Proverbs 22:6. We'll be at Ephesians in a moment, but it says this: "Train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it." So that's given a lot of people some hope. And in your outline, if you got your outline there, pull that out. There are 2 things that I want you to get from this. First of all, training provides boundaries. This word "train up" that I've highlighted here, the word "train up" has the idea of narrowing. It's the Hebrew word shanak, which means to narrow. And the idea is that you create boundaries. You narrow the boundaries. And what you need to do is you need to set clear boundaries. And inside those boundaries, you have to let your children have some freedom. So if you keep changing the boundaries on your kids, you're going to frustrate them. In a moment, we'll look at Ephesians where it says, don't provoke your children to wrath. And one of the ways that you can provoke your children to wrath is keep moving the boundaries. Set clear boundaries. Make sure that those boundaries are narrowed in properly for their safety, for their instruction, for their maturing process. Let me give you a way that you can fail to create the right boundaries. What I call anger correction. I have mastered anger correction. And that is where your response to your children's bad behavior or even your children's childish behavior. Sometimes we don't just correct childish behavior, we actually punish it, and that's a big mistake. We need to correct it and bring them into childishness, but we need children to be children. But we set these boundaries. Yelling, threatening, bribing, begging, manipulating, those are all mistakes in child rearing, and yet they're very common. Those lead to anger correction. But if you want to succeed, you're going to use what I call calm, assertive correction. Calm, assertive correction. Now, I brag on my wife probably too much, but she is awesome. And she is the master of calm, assertive. She uses it with me all the time. And it's kind of like this. I'm not upset, but you are going to change. Let's be calm. Calm, assertive. It works with me and it works with the children. And that calm, assertive correction is when you apply consequences that are appropriate. And I'll get into consequences in a moment. But when you apply these appropriately without a lot of emotion, without yelling, without calling them names, and even though inside you may be in tremendous emotional conflict, you have an exterior of calm, assertive. And the way that works is that you simply make that child rearing about the child, not about you. Making child rearing about you is going to be all about your ego. You're afraid it's going to make you look bad. You are put out by their behavior. You're annoyed. You don't want to have to get up and go correct. Listen, if you don't want to spend time raising children and you don't have children yet, let me tell you something. Get a dog. Don't have children. Children need time. They need calm, assertive correction. We need to train them up. We need to narrow in the boundaries. The second thing in your outline is training provides direction. Now notice what it says. Train up a child in the way he should go. But I want to give you the Hebrew grammatical structure here. This is literally what it says. Train up a child in the way he is going, not in the way he should go. Now, that's not saying that you should not give them directives that you think are appropriate. But what it means is every child is unique. Not every child is going in the same direction. So the way this is written here, it looks like in the way that he should go. So we need to determine where they should go and then teach them to go that way. And that's certainly true as it relates to values and character, morality, and all of those things. But what this is saying is that you are to train a child in the way, literally, in the way he is going. In other words, you have to find out that personality, that temperament. You've got to figure out is that child an extrovert or an introvert? You need to adapt your training to that child uniquely because every child is different. And if you train them all exactly the same way, some of them are going to rebel and some of them are going to be compliant. You have to learn your child. Nobody knows your children like you do. And when you learn where your child is going, maybe you even find out what their calling is. My father was a pastor, and my father believed that two things were important for men. He was a bit of an old school chauvinist, And he was not a misogynist. He really cared about women. He didn't disrespect women, but he was definitely old school, hierarchical relationship. And so what he did was he believed every one of his sons, and he had 4, he believed that every one of his sons, number 1, should go into the military, serve in the military, and then after they go to the military, they should go into the ministry, or they're worthless. Okay, that's a little strong, but he made us realize that you have to go into the military and you have to become a pastor. My brothers, who were not called into the ministry or called in a different kind of ministry, my oldest brother was a therapist for, I don't know, probably 35 years, something like that. He's now retired. He was an incredible pastor to the hearts of people who many of them were at risk. And you know, the number 1 client source for my brother was other pastors. And he would counsel pastors in their duties as well as the struggles of ministering and shepherding to people. What he was a pastor with all of this advanced training in psychology. But for some reason, that's not what my dad saw as a calling, because my dad believed that if you're pastoring but not preaching, you're not pastoring. So that was the old school view. So what happened was that my brothers were frustrated. Now, I was called to ministry, and I knew that at a very young age. I knew that at 14, 15 years old. I knew that God wanted me to be a pastor, and I wanted to be a pastor. And so I responded well to that, but my brothers struggled with that. You see, you've got to understand, what is your child's calling? What is their temperament? What is their personality? And then begin to adapt your training. Adaptive training is where you adapt your correction to that child. Get to know them. If you don't adapt your discipline, your training to your child's personality, you will fail to bring them into true maturity as an adult. Learn your children. So I was thinking before we get into Ephesians 6 that I would share with you this big struggle of children living with stress. I grew up in the 50s, and in the 50s, things were completely different than they are today. Today, children are learning very early about sex. They are being approached with sex, even in elementary school and junior high, or middle school as we call it. There is more stressful conflict because we have 2-parent homes that are both working, and in some cases a single-parent home where the parent is working. And so there's this void, and it creates parental conflict. And this parental conflict, these kids are under the stress of managing that. They also are living with a constant barrage on television and news media of terrorism and shootings and all kinds of natural disasters like we never had before, because information is immediate today with the internet. This is creating tremendous amount of stress. And then we live in somewhat of a hostile world compared to what I grew up in. We would go out, my mom would say, all right, you guys go out and play. And that would be in the morning after breakfast. And we would come back, Mom, can we come in? No, I'm doing the floors. I need a drink of water. Why do you think God created a garden hose? Drink out of the hose. Lead poisoning, I don't know, but anyway, we would never do that. Here's a bottle of water, little Johnny, or Chad. So this whole notion that kids have this similar relationship to society that I had is completely false. Kids lived under tremendous stress. And then we add to that, another problem is that we overschedule our children, oftentimes for our egos. So we put them into sports, and we get them into the arts, whether piano or flute or whatever instrument, or dance or singing, and those things are all wonderful things. We give them pets and teach them how to take care of those pets. School year, do you know the school year? When I went to school, in elementary school, our school year was 150 days a year. Today, on average, it's 180 days. Think about that. That's a full month more than my schooling. Now, I could talk about the quality of schooling, but let's move on. I have too many teachers here, and I love you all. You're my heroes. But we have increased homework. I had maybe 30 minutes of homework when I was a kid. Kids have more homework. The stress, they have adult-like schedules. And sometimes we do this because we think it's going to make them a better person. And yes, those exposure to things are great, but when we are running from activity to activity and we don't have any free play time, we've got a problem. Kids don't have enough free play. They need unstructured free play where they're figuring out on their own. Read a lot of articles about this, and you can go online and you can read massive amount of articles about the importance of children having free play. But here's the things that I derive from this. This is what comes out of free play: creativity, imagination, confidence, decision-making skills, social skills. Now, structured play, as I grew up in as well, it teaches you skills in whatever sport that you're involved in, and it teaches you camaraderie, and it teaches you also sportsmanship. But when you free play, when your children free play, they have to figure things out. Our kids, my boys, Kimberly always had the motor running when they were playing outside just so we can get to the emergency room on time. And I'm not kidding. When you walk into the emergency room and they say, "Hi, Mrs. Scott, which child is it this time?" You know you got a problem. Our boys would make ramps and they would go our pool is 50 yards from our house, but they'd still try to dive from the roof into the pool. These were crazy kids, I'm telling you. And they were constantly getting injured. We were constantly in the emergency room. But you know what? They survived. And they learned all kinds of skills. They learned that the ramp has to be supported properly or else you just go right through the barricade. And they've learned that, no, a skateboard cannot go 50 yards. You're going to have to get the other ramp closer. They learned that taking a grocery cart at the grocery store is not a good play toy. I learned that. They learned that. These are things that kids need to do. And I'm not saying let your kids run wild. Yes, I am. I'm saying let your kids run wild. They will learn, they will grow, they will structure their own social structures. They'll learn hierarchy, they'll learn submission, they'll learn leadership, they'll learn in creativity and imagination. These are important for children. These are skills that they can't learn if you're on them all the time. You helicopter moms and dads, lighten up, land the helicopter, and let them make mistakes. Okay, you said amen. All right, somebody said amen. I'm good. Gracie, our little Gracie, she would go outside. We have a big piece of property. We have about an acre, and she'd be out in the backyard, and she would play. She would come in with bugs. She can't stand. If there's a spider in her room, I'll hear her scream from around the house, "Dad!" And I have to come in. She goes, "It's huge." I go in there, I can barely see it. You know, it's so small. But when she was a kid, she'd have spiders and snakes and nothing. She learned to play by herself. She learned creativity and imagination. The point is, kids are living with too much stress. We need to let them have some free play time. All right, let me show you 5 ways in which you can recapture your children, no matter what age they are, even your adults' children, when they come to you for advice. But it's specifically for your young children. The earlier you start this, the better it's going to be. One of the things I'm going to talk about next week is recapturing the family unit, not just children, but the family unit. And some of the things that we're going to share at both campuses is this, that we need to eat meals together. We need to have family traditions. We need to play games together as a family. We need to have family night. We have family night every Monday night. We need to ask children about their day. We need to get involved with their children. Here's the point. We need to be present. We'll talk about that next week. 5 words to teach your children out of Ephesians chapter 6. The 5 are on your outline. Obedience, honor, nurturing, education, and warning. Let me show you these. First one is obedience. It says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, verse 2. The word obey is a different word than submit. The word submit in the Greek is hupotasso. It just means to submit your needs to someone else, to line up under. But the word translated obey here is hupakuo. Akuo is where we get our word acoustics. It has to do with the reflection of sound. And so when you use the word akuo or akue, it means to hear and respond. You hear a directive, you do the directive. So how do we get our kids to hear and obey? First of all, the biggest problems that parents have is that their directives are not consistent. And if you have inconsistent rules, you're going to develop insecure children. You need to create a set of rules. If you are a 2-parent home, both parents need to get together and strategize. What are the rules? Let's be together on this. Let's figure out those rules, and let's not deviate from that. And make those rules. Here's just some good advice on this. Make sure the rules are clear to your kids. Make sure the rules are fair. Don't ask your 5-year-old to act like they're 35. Number 1, they won't be able to do it. Number 2, if they do act like they're 35, they will have no friends. Because their little friends think you're a nerd at 35. So take time to make sure that they're clear and they're fair and that they're doable. Make sure that they can actually perform the rule that you are applying to them. Number 4 is make sure they're understandable, that they really actually understand what those are. And we'll get to the consequences in a moment. And then make sure they're measurable. Biggest mistakes I've made as a father is that I make up rules on the fly. Like I'm annoyed by what they're doing, so I make up a rule. Parents, you know what I'm talking about. Make sure that you are fair and that they are clear and they are measurable. The second thing he says is honor. Honor your father and your mother. And I could spend a lot of time on this, but I think it's one of the most important things that you can teach your children. The word honor is the word tameo. My name comes from that, Timothy. Timothy means honoring God. I used to have a youth pastor. He'd walk up to me, Jerry Rife, Pastor Jerry, we called him, some of you may know him. He walked up to me and he'd grab me by the shirt, literally like this, and he'd go. He was a tough youth pastor, by the way. He'd go, Timothy, honoring God. Are you honoring God? I'd just be shaking. I go, I hate this guy. Anyway, tameo, Tim, it means honor. And the idea of honor is not just honor, but it means to place value upon. So what children are to do is they are to put value, a higher value on their parents. And they need to honor and respect them. Kids learn from parental respect. What I mean by that is, number 1, you need to show respect to your children. Respect how old they are, respect their abilities, respect their ability to understand or not understand. But here's the key. Fathers, mothers, talk to your spouse with honor. Don't disrespect your spouse in front of your kids. Go into your room and disrespect them all. No, that's not. But you should respect their father or their mother in front of you. And if you've gone through a divorce and you have an ex and your children are going back and forth, listen, don't dishonor that ex and because they love that man or that woman. That's their mother or father. Don't show disrespect, even though they're maybe a reprehensible individual, which if they lost you, they are, of course. But show respect because that's their father or their mother. And so many kids don't learn respect because they don't hear parents respecting each other. Tell your kids how much you love their mother. Tell your kids how much you love their father. Let them know how important that is to respect that union, and they will grow into that. When your child shows disrespect, you should treat it with the same discipline that you would rebellion. Rebellion is different than childishness. When a child acts childish, you correct. When the child is in rebellion, you must use discipline, not punishment. Punishment looks back, discipline looks forward. So you take that child, and the discipline may be strong and harsh, and it may be, but it needs to be clear and fair. And it says, you've done this. This is what you're going to do for future. You need to understand this. That's discipline. But when a child is being childish, let them be a child that's just being corrected. Okay, you can't do that here, but you can do that outside. But disrespect should be treated with the same discipline as rebellion. And listen to this. A child without respect will become an adult without respect. That adult that was raised in a home without respect will become an adult that has no respect for people's property, have no respect for people's privacy, have no respect for protecting people's failures, have no respect for value of money. They will not respect other people. They will not respect authority. That's your job to teach them. A culture in which there is pervasive disrespect will be a culture in decline, a society in decline. Believe me, and this is not a political statement, this is actually a sociological observation that we in this country are in tremendous decline because there's no respect for authority. And I overstatement, no respect. But there is a pervasiveness of disrespect. There's a disrespect for law enforcement, and you take 2 or 3 bad people and then you label all law enforcement wrong. It's a huge mistake. Don't let your kids believe that. The vast majority, 90-something% of law enforcement are incredible people who care about society and care about your kids and care about your protection. Teach them the value of respect for authority. Every teacher has flaws, but teach your children to respect their teachers. Teachers are heroes. Teach respect. To fail to teach our children respect is to fail to recapture the family, recapture those hearts, because they're going to go into this world and they need to know what it means to respect. In verse 2, it goes on, this is the first commandment with a promise. When you honor your father and your mother, this is a commandment that actually has a promise with it of long life. And then verse 3 says, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land is the promise. Look at verse 4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. I don't know why he didn't say mothers. Let me change that. I'm just going to give you a little heads up. This is going to sound a little sexist. And you can just take this from Uncle Tim. Moms, by and large, I'm trying to be careful, are much better at nurturing children than fathers. Fathers are crucial to the development of a child. There's something about moms. You never see a guy on the side of the football field in the NFL when the camera comes by, Dad. It's always mom. Because dads aren't anything. Have you ever been to a wedding? The man means nothing. The bride looks great. He looks like a scrub. All the attention goes to her. Okay, that's enough sexist remark for one day. But it's important to understand that fathers Avoid provoking your children to wrath. Take time to nurture. Get inside the heart. Guys have a tendency to fix what's wrong, and when they fix what's wrong, they may overreact. And then he says, bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. I love this. Bring them up. The Greek word is here up, and it just is the word extrepho. And the word extrepho means literally to make wide, to give a wide stance. It's the idea of support and stability through nurturing. So when you nurture, you give health and stability to your child. So when you build a fence, if you've ever built a fence, you take those posts and you cement those in, and they're strong and they're stable, and then you put the cross members, and then you can put up the pickets on that fence. But those posts are critical. They bring stability to that fence, make it straight and strong. That's what this word means. Bring them up in bringing stability into their lives. You know, when I was a kid, I was learning how to ride a bicycle, and I was very fearful as a child. And so my brothers learned without training wheels, but I was the guy that had training wheels, you know. And I tried that for a while, and all you're doing is leaning like this on one side. You know, the tire's wearing out. This one's out. This one's pristine over here. All complete rubber on that one. And, I mean, that's how I knew. So my sister goes, we're done with that, my older sister. She takes training wheels off. She goes, Timmy, you're going to learn how to ride a bike today. And I'm like, okay. And she held the back of my bike on, you know, we had that cool banana seat, you know, from the 50s. And she's holding on to that thing. I don't know if that was called a sissy bar or whatever. Anyway, whatever it was my sissy holding on. And she's holding on like this, and she's stabilizing me, and I'm doing it. She goes, I'm holding on, don't worry. And then after about several hours of doing this, one time I'm like, I can do this. And I realized she wasn't holding on anymore. And I turned around, and I said, you're not holding on. And the fear gripped me. And for whatever reason, I turned that handle just like that because I wanted to turn around and go the other way. And I went flying over the handlebars. I wasn't going very fast, but I scraped up my face. That's what happened. It could happen to you. And I go, why'd you let go? She goes, you were doing fine till you got afraid because you realized I wasn't. And then she started to mock me. And I realized something that day. Number one, my sister is mean. Number two, don't let go until your kids are ready. Your kids need to be ready because there's more than just stability of skill set. There is an ability to handle it emotionally. Make sure your kids, train them. Your goal is to train those children to leave you. And believe me, at some point, you want them to leave you. It is important to bring stability. And this word, bring them up, means to bring a wideness, a stability, a strength, a competency in not only skill, but emotional and spiritual health. And then the next one is to educate. The word is discipline, paideia, which simply means to give them proper, clear discipline. Children are going to be naturally grow away from you. That's their job. And what's going to happen is at about age 13, whenever they hit puberty, I had that about 16, but that was a personal issue. But whatever your kids, whenever they start reaching that puberty age, they're going to start to rebel. And your job is not to react to that rebellion. Your job is to coach them through that rebellion. Because what they're doing is they're trying to assert their independence. Your job is to teach them how to be independent and to develop their own decision-making skills based on character and values. And at some point, you have to shift your discipline from your values to the values you've instilled in your children, and you only discipline them for the values that they own. That may be 16 in the case of two of our kids, 37 I think it was, somewhere in there. But at some point, you've got to release them onto their own value set and then coach them. So many parents don't prepare their kids to grow away. That's a natural and beautiful thing. And you want that to happen. Society is overwhelming your kids with anti-Christian values. And you need to make sure that you're inculcating into their hearts the values that come from God's word. He says, bring them up in the discipline and instruction of what? Of the Lord. We'll talk more about that next week. And then finally, the last one is the word instruction. The word instruction is this Greek word nouthesis. Now, I bring that word up because some of you have heard of nouthetic counseling. Nouthetic counseling was popular in the 60s and 70s by a guy named Jay Adams, who's a Christian man. I don't agree totally with what he wrote. I've read all of his books, and he was a genius for sure. But there were some limitations to this. But let me tell you what the word nouthetic or nouthesis means. It means to warn. It means to warn through admonition. In other words, if you do this, this will happen. If you do this, this will happen. So you tell them about consequences. Now, the important thing about that is that there are two kinds of consequences. There are what we call logical consequences, and then there are natural consequences. Let me deal with the second first. Natural consequences are like this. Parents, listen carefully. Natural consequences are when you don't study, you're going to fail a test. Here's another natural consequence. You prepare their lunch for them. I don't know if you do sack lunches anymore, they just eat at school, but whatever. Let's pretend that they take a sack lunch. So you've got a sack lunch. You've got it prepared. It's right by their coat, and they're getting ready to go out the door. They grab their coat. They forget their lunch. And 11:30, you get a phone call. I forgot my lunch. Now, you got to ask yourself, am I going to be a lunch taker parent, or am I going to be a good parent? Oh, I know you think I'm evil. They will not starve to death. They need to learn natural consequences. When they don't take their lunch, they miss a lunch. Of course, you feed them a tremendous amount of snacks when they get home from school at 2:30. But the reality is they need to learn natural consequences. And I can promise you this, the next day, they will take their lunch. But what are logical consequences? See, natural consequence, the key word is allow. Allow natural consequences to happen. Don't bail out your kids. The second one is logical consequence, which is not the word allow, but the word apply. So apply consequences. So for example, if your child will not get off their cell phone at the dinner table, what's the appropriate consequence? Ground them for 2 years? No. Take their car away from them? No. It's not appropriate to the behavior. So you have to line up the consequence, because it's a logical consequence. You have to line up the consequence to the behavior. So if they're being irresponsible with their cell phone, then you take their cell phone away. Not forever, just for 3 years. Believe me, a week is forever for a teenager. So you have to figure out what are the logical consequences. Even when they're children, young children and teenagers, they need to learn these logical consequences. I'm telling you, think about the difference between natural consequences where you allow things to happen and logical consequences where you apply appropriate, specifically to the behavior consequence. That will be the instruction. So here's what you have to do. 5 words. Teach them obedience. Teach them honor. Teach them through nurturing. Teach them through education. Inculcate with them warning that here are the consequences of these behaviors. Some are small and some are great, and they will grow. Let me close with this. Every one of you in this room can be a child of God. And becoming a child of God is a very simple process. But what that takes is that when you become a child of God, it's simply coming to Jesus Christ and saying, Lord Jesus, I believe in you. Listen to this out of John chapter 1, verse 12. He went to his, in verse 11 it says, Jesus came to his own, but his own rejected him. But in verse 12 it says this, but as many as received him and believed in his name, he gave them the right to become the children of God. So Jesus is coming to all of us and he's saying, do you want to be my child? If you want to be a child of God, all you have to do is receive me, believe in me, and you will have eternal life, and you will be my child forever. You can be a child of God. And the benefits are amazing. I want to call you to that. If you've never received Jesus Christ as your Savior, right now you can have him in your heart and your life.